Is it finally ready?
Yes, my lord, it is finally ready.
Well then, let's see it in action.
Hello everyone, hope you guys are doing well. Today the parts for the trebuchet finally came in, so I can start with the construction of the trebuchet. Let's bring in the MOC and start building. Alright, so I have finished the trebuchet. Now one thing I do want to say is that the design of the trebuchet you just saw me build belongs to the Edge of Bricks. It is a great trebuchet design. I love the framework of it, and I do recommend you guys go check out his channel. He makes a lot of other cool MOCs. And the parts for that trebuchet will be available on my website in case you would like to build a trebuchet for yourself. Now getting back to the MOC itself, you'll notice that I changed the trebuchet up quite a bit. I did a lot of work off camera and modified the trebuchet in order to make sure that the trebuchet actually works. So if we come around and take a look at the back of the trebuchet, you can see I came up with a pretty unique winch mechanism. I attached a crowbar piece which is held by these rubber bands from either side. The crowbar's hooked side acts as a safety lock because the pressure of the rubber band pushes it downward into one of the holes, which prevents the winch from unwinding in the opposite direction when the trebuchet arm is being brought down. And the crowbar basically acts as a release mechanism as well, because it is linked to the release lever. Now, the reason I went through the trouble to create this mechanism was because I wanted the trebuchet to be able to have space for 2 people to wind the trebuchet. This would be more realistic because a single person winding the trebuchet would take a longer time. You will also notice that the ropes are not being winded directly onto the winch drum, but are instead directed by a couple of pulleys further in the front. This is done to make sure that the sling itself has enough space to go through the winding ropes as it is being launched. It also helps the loading process, making it easier to feed the sling in between the 2 winding ropes while making sure it doesn't end up all tangled up. Now another thing you'll notice is that the glide track is angled, and this is done to help gradually lift the sling into the air when the trebuchet is fired. It also helps hide some of the rope which leads to the pulleys, but you'll know what I mean once I take the glide track off here. So the glide track comes off just like this, along with these 2 side parts, so here you can see just how the whole thing works. As we wind the trebuchet, the 2 strings leading to the pulleys are directed by these flexible hose pieces, which very conveniently make sure that the ropes don't get tangled, and also make sure that there is as little friction as possible. And it is very important for there to be little to no friction, because you can have the perfect trebuchet with the right counterweight and everything, but if there's friction in the winch mechanism, it's over. Your trebuchet won't fire. And that was one of the biggest issues I faced using this design, but thankfully I was able to solve it using this system right here. Now, as for how historically accurate this system is, well, that I don't know. To me it looks like some sort of pipe system taken straight from Star Wars, but I enjoyed coming up with this solution, and as long as I cover it up, no one will know, right? As I bring the trebuchet arm down, I'll get to show you guys the sling which I made. So the way the sling works is that there's a loop on one end of the sling which goes onto the hook right here, and the hook was actually made to be adjustable in order to change the launch angle. If you angle it upwards, it releases later than if you were to angle it downwards. Then the sling is pulled down the ramp, and if we come around, here we have a couple of boulders that we can load up onto the sling, like so. And this is what the trebuchet looks like in its fully loaded position. At this point, the release lever is ready to be pulled down and the trebuchet is ready to fire. But before we fire it, I also wanted to show you guys the modifications I made to the counterweight of the trebuchet, which I based off of some historical images of the medieval trebuchet. As for the weight inside, I added a bunch of coins so the whole thing measures to around 140 grams, but I can definitely make it heavier if I wanted to. So now let's fire the trebuchet. I tried to make the release mechanism accurate to minifig scale, so we would have our minifigure here who would come along and push the lever down and let it fly. And there it goes, a successful shot. You can hear it rolling on the floor. I would say it flew around 2.5 meters, so yeah, I think I can definitely make it fire further if I played around with the counterweight as well as the hook mechanism. This led me to conduct a couple of tests in order to see what happened when the hook on the trebuchet arm was adjusted. In the first test, I angled the hook downwards and this is what happened. You can see that it resulted in a faster release time, and the projectile went way over the town. In the second test, I angled the hook upwards, and this is what happened. This resulted in a slower release time, and you can see how it just barely hits the front house there. Now, I was able to find the sweet spot, which was somewhere in between the two extremes, and this was the result. And this actually causes it to land directly in the middle of the town. I'm very proud of how I was able to make the hook system actually work so that it more closely resembles a real medieval trebuchet. Another thing I noticed is that there's another type of sling which does not utilize the loop and hook, and instead the sling is simply attached directly onto the trebuchet arm. I wanted to see if this type of sling would work with my trebuchet, so I created a similar sling design to those that I saw online. In theory, this design would make the loading process much simpler because now we wouldn't have to worry about making sure the sling is hooked properly. We would just have to slide the sling onto the track and load the projectile, similar to the loading process of a catapult. The only downside I see to this design is that it would not be able to be adjusted as easily as the sling with the hook. And another good thing about the trebuchet is that the slings come off pretty easily, so I can just interchange the slings and change the whole look of the trebuchet, depending on how I'm feeling. Now unfortunately, I've spent so much time tweaking and trying to make this design work, and for some reason I cannot get it to launch even once. It either rolls out too soon and launches backwards, or it just never leaves the sling. I feel like that indicates my sling basket must be adjusted to make sure it is actually able to release the projectile, but when I try stretching it, the projectile simply falls out. So I still need to find that sweet spot with the sling design. Feel free to comment down below if you have any suggestions. I will make a future update video if I do end up making it work. But now with the trebuchet complete, the whole MOC looks amazing. Now, when I was planning the build, I never thought I would be able to pack so many things into this MOC. The trebuchet, the streams, the tents, the camp, and the forest area. But here we are, we got the little stream running across, the stakes, the tents on the right, and the trebuchet on the left. The tents from episode 2 are something I'm proud of as well. I even added a couple of beds inside each of the tents to make them feel less empty. I don't know about you guys, but I'm super proud of how the trebuchet turned out, and it was super fun to design as well. It may have been frustrating in the beginning trying to make it launch a projectile and watching it fail, but that is what made it that much more rewarding when it did work. And I got it to work pretty consistently too. I mean, I could just launch the trebuchet all day and have it hit the same target over and over. And that is exactly why I would also recommend you guys to build trebuchets of your own and challenge yourself to tweak it in order to make it actually fire a projectile. I think there's something truly special about building a trebuchet in LEGO. There are so many things to consider when designing it. I mean, you have the counterweight, the arm length, the sling design, and the sling length, the winding mechanism, and just so much more. And getting it to work is the best and most fun part about it. I mean, who wouldn't want to own a working medieval trebuchet in LEGO? So I encourage you guys to build your own trebuchets. They don't have to be as big as mine, you can start small and work from there. I remember my first trebuchet was definitely not as flashy as this one. You can start from scratch and design it entirely yourself, or you can get the parts for the trebuchet using the link below and go from there. Hopefully this will inspire some of you guys to build your own trebuchets. That being said, this is the end of the Trebuchet Siege Camp MOC series, but it is definitely not the last time you'll see the Trebuchet, as I do have a little surprise video coming out related to this MOC that I think you guys will enjoy, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on it. As always, let me know down in the comments what you guys want me to build in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.